Okay, great. Looks like we got it going and people can still hear me. So sorry for the delay there, but that's okay. It's 4:33. So as a heads up, I'm going to be recording this so we can post it up to YouTube later. So if there's something you missed, don't worry, you can go back and watch from the beginning. A lot of the questions that came in are similar. So a couple of the main ones I'll probably answer at the beginning and at the end. But again, in general, and we'll post this up later so you'll be able to see. The other thing is, before I introduce myself and delve in here, that we have an updating question Excel sheet that is uploading right now, and all the addresses to this that you can find on Worldbuilders. You'll find the address to where you can type in questions to the Google update, and I can look at those answers questions and then provide answers. Okay, so hi, thank you for bearing with me. Here we go. Name is Seth Fishman. I'm a literary agent at the Gernert Company. I was the stretch goal for the wonderful Worldbuilders fundraiser, which I'm really happy to be part of, and thank you all for joining in that. So I have a little bit about me. I have been an agent for 12 years. I work at a place called the Gernert Company. I started at a place called Sterling Lord Literaristic, and I represent a pretty wide range of material, as well as being an author myself. I have 2 YA thrillers, and I have a picture book coming this fall and a couple more coming afterwards. And I think that's helped me get my mind wrapped around a little bit of the whole picture, and has been helpful for me as an agent. So I would love to answer questions for you guys, letting you know a little bit more about what I represent. I represent everything from, well, on the wall, I guess I'm not going to just start pulling them down. I have some of the books I represent, but I represent everything from big literary like the Tiger's Wife to sci-fi and fantasy like Anne Leckie and Django Wexler and Daryl Gregory and Liu Cixin and so on and so forth. I represent big webcomics like Randall Munroe's XKCD or Kate Beaton's Hark a Vagrant, Zach Wiener-Smith's SMBC, which is really fun, and am sort of all over the place in what I handle, and want to help you guys get there yourself. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the Ask Me Anything, and I will answer them, and maybe I'll tell you who some of these people are who are asking the questions too. But we'll just go in order, as is only fair, and we'll make sure to answer all the ridiculous questions as well if I can. Okay, so with that, here we go. First question is, say I finished a book. This is from Sassafras. Say I finished a book, polished it even. Is that a good time to start thinking about getting an agent? Too late or too soon? So basically the real question is, when is it time to start looking for an agent? Well, the most correct answer to that is when you have a full novel and when that novel's polished. There are plenty of extenuating circumstances where people get agents before that for a lot of reasons, but all things considered, for the standard query, or you want to have a full, complete, and polished draft. Examples of that not being the case would be, say, in the sci-fi world specifically, fantasy world specifically, there's a lot of short story writing and a strong community building along those lines. So if you get approached by an agent when you have short stories and you have a novel you're working on, then you might end up signing with that person. However, I, for instance, will often connect to someone but not necessarily sign them until after I read that manuscript, because I think it's really important that we are on the same page with what we're working on. Not just that I like your manuscript, but that I love your manuscript. I think there's a real direct correlation to the interest that I might have as a literary agent to being able to sell a book. And I think that can't be really underplayed enough. I mean, the fact of the matter is, an agent can sell a book. I think that's sort of the easiest part of the gig. What's the hardest part is being able to do everything else around it, which is to be able to help usher that book through the maze of editor complexes and the problems that is publishing, and help you get that book on the shelf and sustain itself. The goal is not to have, and I know a lot of people, I felt this way, like the goal should be in your life, I'm just want to get this book published on a shelf. And you know what? That's a great goal to have, and it's a real accomplishment. But in publishing, I really believe that there's a lot of different milestones, and my goal is to not have the one book, it's to have a sustained career. You have one book out and it doesn't work very well, then it gets pulled from the shelves, and a couple of years later you're in a bookstore and you can't find your book. That's actually not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is to go and always find your book. So that's the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. The reason why we want a full manuscript that's finished is basically because it shows that you've done the work, and it also just stops the questions that are obvious. I mean, even my own clients will sometimes approach me and be like, should I go ahead and edit this section that I need to do it before I send it to you, or do you want to look at it now? And the fact of the matter is that I'd be happy to look at anything that my clients send me, but if they know that there are problems with it, specific problems, then most of the time, if you fix those problems first, that has me being able to be a much more value add to that manuscript in terms of reading it and understanding where it's supposed to go in the marketplace and how to edit it. So, good long-winded first question and answer. Okay, so next one. Like the chicken and the egg, I'm continually debating whether I seek an editor or agent first. An editor will improve the novel before showing it to an agent help me get a great editor and publisher. Okay, so I hear you here. The truth of the matter is that this is not exactly hard at all. The truth of the matter is that you should absolutely get an agent first. First of all, if you're getting an editor before an agent, that means the editor you're getting is not a publishing editor. It is a freelance editor. There are a lot of great freelance editors out there, don't get me wrong, but you're paying that person for their work. So you're paying an editor. And you can do that. That happens. But, the goal here is to try and get through without you paying people stuff. So you get the manuscript to as good as possible. You send it to an agent, and then an agent helps you get it as strong as possible, and then they sell it to an editor and publisher. That really is the process. If you sell it to if you show it to an editor first at a publishing house, and that's one of the things also with, we'll talk about, happen to talk about any genre and whatnot, but as this is Worldbuilders, this tends to be aimed a little bit more towards sci-fi and fantasy. The editors are very active and participatory in the world, which is great. They show up at the cons, they're right there, and they'll approach you very quickly. But the fact of the matter is that you really don't want to show them anything until you get an agent, because you're either blowing your chances or you're letting them get their hands on you before you're ready for that, because you don't want to be undersold as well. So absolutely get it to an agent first. And try not to, the truth of the matter is that if the book needs a professional editor to look at, that you're paying money to before it goes to an agent, then maybe the book's not ready. And you kind of wanted it to get there. So what are 3 characteristics that a writer should look for in an agent? Great question, Ashley. Well, so I think there's a big misconception about sort of who is your person in publishing. I think we grow up and we think about it as an editor, but editors in the sci-fi world, it's a little bit different. They do stay at their houses a little bit more often, but they move. Editors can move a house, and if they move to a different house or a different publishing company, then they have to leave their books, because the publisher is actually what buys that book, and so you get abandoned. That book still might succeed. There's plenty of books that have been taken over that have done very well and have strong editorial support that I've had, like Sleeping Giants that I represent. The acquiring editor left and it was taken over by the wonderful Mike Braff, who's done a really great job with it and really supports the book as well. However, when I moved my agencies, all my clients came with me, and they all got to stick with me as that relationship. And I think the agent relationship is really the one that you're going to have all the way through. So you're really looking for someone who's going to be there in the long term. So you want someone who is editorially on the same side as you. Now maybe you don't want an editor, that's fine, but you need to just be on the same page as that, because I don't really want to work with a client who doesn't want to work with me editorially. And if that's a problem, then that's something we need to figure that out early. So you want to be on the same page with that person. If they even give you notes, don't force feed them, take them as you want. And then you want to have someone who has vision beyond the book, beyond the sell. You want to have someone who can help you connect to Amazon, who can help you come up with creative essay ideas, who can help you, who has an agency equipped to be able to sell the foreign rights to the book, or the audio rights to the book, or the film and TV rights. Ask all those questions. And I think that leads to a really important point. The agent-author relationship is sort of strange in the world of things, because it's a dynamic that shifts. When you are looking for an agent, the power is sort of in the agent's hands. We can reject you, but you're really hiring someone. I mean, you're hiring someone to take, well, we work for spec until we sell something, which is true, but we're going to take 15% of your domestic sales and 20% of your foreign, and that's a real amount of money. That's like a tax. And we earn it. I believe an agent absolutely makes that back for you in everything from the negotiations to subsidiary right deals. However, you're paying us, so you have to that there has to at least be a thing of equals. And you should never be afraid to ask the questions that you need to ask to an agent to make sure that you're on the same page about things, because an agent can really, if they do things the wrong way, they can actually screw up your career as much as they can make it. So just don't jump at the first person that says that they want to take you on. Make sure you research that person. Make sure you talk to other people. Give other people that you've queried time. Let them know that someone's said that they want to represent you. And if that person wants to represent you, they'll wait. They won't wait forever, but they'll wait 2 weeks. They'll wait 3 weeks. I've waited longer than that, as long as someone was communicative with me. So I think that's really important. You got to stand up for yourself in that kind of relationship. Okay, great. Water break. Okay. Here we go. I'm not really sure who you are, but this came up in my Facebook. Yes. If you could pick between traveling for the rest of your life but having no real home, or never leaving your state and having a house, which would you pick? That doesn't really matter to this, I guess, but I think I don't mean having a house, but I think I would like to, I don't know, traveling. I like traveling. Okay, what's the first thing you look for in a query letter? Honestly, simplicity. This is a quick thing. I'm going to bring this up. I did a Worldbuilder thing before. It's an hour-long YouTube video. You can find it. Type in Seth Fishman Worldbuilder, and it's called it's how to write a query letter. It has all this information. So I'm not going to stick long on query letters, but the simple matter is they need to be short. They need to be simple, nothing fancy. Spell my name right, and then the first line. I want to know why you're connecting to me and what you're writing about, and so that's really the first thing I look for in query letters: simplicity and not sort of overdoing it. I don't want to see a picture of you, no offense. I don't want to see an excerpt of the book. I don't want to see crazy italics or fonts or glitter, or a snack that you sent, which some people have done before. Even if I want to eat that snack, I'm not going to. Okay, so let's see here. Should you completely finish your book? Yes. If you live in a small country, is it as easy to find a good agent? Is it better to be published in places like America? That's a great question. Well, there are markets everywhere, and I can't answer as to whether the Czech market has a strong sci-fi. I mean, I know it has a sci-fi existence. I just don't know how easy it is to break into that space or to find an agent into that space. But wherever you find an agent, make sure it's someone who looks out for your interests. So if it's a Czech agent, that's okay. Make sure that they have a strong foreign rights department that sells into the United States, that sells into the UK, in Germany, France. Those are major, China now, major foreign markets. And obviously the US is the biggest market, but there are plenty of authors. I have some authors who do okay in the States, but then are have been on the bestseller list in Germany for years. And that's not something to be ignored. I mean, we're on a global level right now. So it's definitely important that wherever you sign up, you make sure you look all over the place. How do agents typically come across new authors? It often gets implied. It is almost impossible to get one unless you manage to get a good contact, as Patrick Rothfuss did when he won his creative writing contest. So, I think part of what's going on here is how you find an agent, or how do we find people is that it's the system's rigged against you. And of course, the easiest way for me to find someone is to have a client I represent who is very, someone who I respect sends me, someone that they respect, and I say, wow, okay, I'm going to read this. But we do take on from the slush pile plenty. I think every agent will tell you that. Some agents, myself included, I don't have like a no-fly zone, don't send me queries, and some people really do that for like 3 months. You can always send me a query, but sometimes I'm just, I'm a human being. Sometimes I'm just busier at a certain moment, and those queries will fall by the wayside. Not that I won't read them or that my assistant won't read them, but I will tell my assistant that right now I'm not looking for much, and that happens. But we will absolutely look in the slush pile. In terms of other ways to get agents, though, or to get on maps, I mean, one thing for sure is to write short fiction. We all look through short fiction. And short fiction is a great way to get nominated for awards, too. If you don't think that when the Hugo or the Nebula Award nomination list comes out that every agent isn't scanning that list, like we are. And that's one of the ways that we find people. So that's another thing. And another is to find a writing group, find people that you can connect to. I mean, I think the writing workshop, Clarion West and Clarion, is incredible. And if you can connect to that, I think you should. But there are a lot of different ways. In fact, also through Worldbuilders, last year, someone won a contest, and randomly I read their query, and I thought it was really great. So, even that can happen, just sort of those things. But yeah, it's worth you trying what you can to find your way. But, straight through the slush pile will work. And I think the SFF readers are a little bit more willing to do that. One thing that's interesting, though, is that, in the science fiction and fantasy world, synopses are really hard to buy. Buy might be the wrong word. But, every epic fantasy novel it's like impossible to summarize. And the names are strange. And, I can roll with it because I know that world. But I'm not going to take on that query because of it. In other words, like that should work in your favor. When things land on my desk, I'm looking to dive into the pages. So I think it's really important that you make the book itself strong. That's the real focus. Simple in and out query letter, get me to the pages, and then you write a great book. And that's not the easy thing to do. That's the hard thing. So make sure that you focus on that and don't send things off a little bit early. Okay. If your book is absolutely awesome, do you think it is simple enough to eventually find an agent, or is it blind luck, or somewhere in between? So that builds off this question. But what I'll say is that if you write me a good book, I can sell that good book. And if you think I'm not looking for it, I'm absolutely looking for it. But sometimes things are just different than they just go in different ways than you think they are. For instance, if you talk about Ann Leckie, I know she had people that she was out to, and she sent me this book that I thought was Ancillary Justice, which had a different title, and I thought was wonderful. But I also thought it was going to be a really hard sell. And that's what I told her. I can't say no to this book. I love it too much, but I'm not sure where or how we're going to sell it. And that wasn't sort of like a desolate kind of answer. For me, it was trying to be realistic in my expectations for it. Saying, I'm just not sure. On this one, I don't have a target as to where it should go. And it ended up being, Orbit, everyone got behind it. It was sort of it was a love story for me, and then it was their love story, and then, the book is not a love story, but you know what I mean. And it just sort of became that thing. And now you look at her, and she's, you know, a major player in the sci-fi world, but it happened off of me just following something that I loved. I'm not saying I'm her writing a great book, but I only took her on because it was just something that I loved, and it was this wonderful book. But it was also something I wasn't sure about because I hadn't seen it really before. So that's something that's exciting, but also you're in the dark a little bit, and I think that's some of the most exciting times in our game right now. If your book is awesome, you just asked, I just did that question. Sorry about that. Okay, if someone has written a book that's actually good, where would they go from there to actually make it big? This could include writing sequels or other books. Okay, so let's say the book is good and you have an agent and you sell it well. Really, the thing that's really important, you find an agent you care about, and then you find a publisher you care about and you believe in. It makes sense to think to yourself that I'm going to go with a big offer, and most of the time people do that as well. I mean, it's sort of that all comes together. There's a direct correlation between offer size and success of a book, but that's not always the case. And I think it's really important to make sure that you are really connected to the editor, that you feel the editor is going to be around there for a bit, that the publisher gets the book, and because unfortunately, as much as the author and the agent can do to try and make this not the case, and we can do a lot, but a lot of it still really just rests on how hard a publisher pushes a book. Because a publisher comes into a sales meeting and they have a lot of titles, and it's like, which book are they pulling out to focus on? And so ways that I get around that is I have my own connections, my own people that I contact to try and push books and work with the clients on my own to be able to get them placed in certain places. But there's really only so far as that can go. Take Del Rey, when they really want to make a book big, they just do this really great thing where they print 5,000 galleys and give them away, and then get people reading it, and then they go to all the cons and they put big posters up and they really get behind that book in a big way and just and make people pay attention to it. In a lot of ways, that's the big problem nowadays. It's just there's a lot of books and there's less people reading, and how do you get through that noise? So in order to be able to make a next book bigger, sequels aren't necessarily the key or the answer. There's certainly series that grow and get big, and we know George R. R. Martin, Pierce Brown. Everyone will be really bored when Pat's next book comes out, of course. But one thing about series that you have to remember is that for most of the time, I believe this holds true. I don't know if this has ever not been true. Perhaps the best-selling book of that series will always be the first book. So that means that you will always have less sales further down. Now, sometimes that's not a problem. We're all selling lots of copies and we're all happy. But even if you sell a lot of a first book, by book 4, the number might be low enough that it's causing problems. So what you're looking to do is to basically create genius and continue that in whatever form that takes, whether that's in a series or going elsewhere. You don't have to feel like you need to connect only to a series to do that. But you certainly other books. I mean, the goal is to go onwards and to be creative about how you present the book. You want to have a community yourself that will help. This social media thing that everyone always talks about. It's actually important because you can connect directly to librarians. You can connect directly to bookstore owners. You can connect directly to other authors, and you build sort of a community around yourself, and that's how people get to know who you are. And a lot of times it's not, the book reading is really important, but there's a lot of good books out there. So what you need to do is to be able to create a flash that people see. And that's part of what we're trying to do as an agent, is to help you put the pieces together to make that happen. All right, let's see here. Hi, Seth. Hello, Anthony. I am primarily a musician and soon to be a novelist. When seeking an agent or any representation, do you recommend pitching a book in complete form? I already said that, which is yes. Or would you single chapters and sections? Here, let me also be clear. I say this to big people too. I talk to a big comic book writer. They're huge in their space. They think they can sell a book on a partial, and maybe they can, but they're not going to get as much money, nor will there be as many publishers willing to offer. If you want the highest possible thing, you have a finished, complete product. You can sell something on a partial. It's going to be less money, therefore potentially less enthusiasm around your book. There's always exceptions to that rule, but ignore them because those don't, those are the things that trip you up. You should follow what is the truest path to being able to, it's not just success, it's to being able to continue to write, which is your passion. You need to be able to be willing to be patient if that's what you want to do. A finished product can help your chances being received well. However, the literal world is new to me. Yeah. And so that's the same. Finished product. Do you work with flash fiction writers? It's not a yes and not a no. I work with whomever and whatever really gets to me in a specific way. There's some fun questions going on. Oh, actually, you know what? I want to answer a question that has any of the recent political turmoil influenced what kind of fiction you're interested in representing? And the answer is yes. Now, I'm not going to make this about politics, but I will say is that I think that one thing that's really going on is there's a real understanding that there are gatekeepers, and despite any positive intention, I'm still a straight white guy. And while I represent some authors who are not that, I take it personally that it's important for me to be part of the solution, and so I'm looking for things that are different, and I'm willing and interested in it, and also not just things that are like signposts out there. I represent the author Sam Miller, who's a great writer. His first book is a YA book coming out soon. And it's basically about an anorexic boy in high school who then develops magic powers because of that. Well, the less he eats, the more he can do. Now that's a great lesson for kids. But the thing is that it tackles a subject in sort of a different way. And Sam's the kind of writer of the future that we're looking for, where it's not like flashing lights, issue book. No, it's a great book, and it has issues that are just seamlessly put in there. And I really, really do care about that. Everything from the kids' picture books to the adult novels, I care about books that have purpose to it. That said, I don't do nonfiction like political books. So you do it in whatever ways you can do it. Okay, how stressful would it be going solo and not using an agent? Is it? Well, you can listen. You can do your own stuff like Hugh Howey style, which is perfectly successful for a lot of people. A lot of times those people end up with agents anyways, Hugh Howey included, mainly because there are subsidiary rights, like foreign rights that we handle very well, or film or TV and contracts and helping you out and the side rights. So it's really important it's very important to think along those lines. Where are the comments? Sorry, I'm going to go look over here and see if I can find the comments. I don't want to close this though, so I'm not seeing them. I want to see the. I can see that I can see who the top audience of this is. That's not very helpful. Well, Rachel, you're listening to this. Do you want to throw some of those questions? I can see who the top audience of this is. That's not very helpful. Into the thing. Okay, sorry about that pause. Here I am again. So here we go. Let me answer a couple of those that have come my way. It's very weird doing this straight, blank, no volume, so apologies for that. Let me answer some of these questions that is getting sent in my way a little more live. Okay, and thanks for your help with that, Rachel. Okay, so here's one of them. What's the best way to get started as an agent? Great question. I've always wanted to be a writer, and that's where I got started. Is realizing that agents even existed. I unfortunately, being an agent is, I think it's the best job in the world, but it takes a while to sort of get to that place. You almost always have to start as an intern, which is a major reason why there's real problems. I mean, it's a New York-based industry where you're asking people to take very little to no money to work in New York City, which is really expensive. So that's very difficult. But I started as an intern at Don Moss Agency, which is a sci-fi and fantasy agency that's really great. And then I got a job as an assistant. And I was an assistant for 5 years before I became a full agent. However, by year 1.5, I was already taking on my own clients. And so you get to be that halfway thing all the way up. There's a lot of places that you can find job opportunities, publishersmarketplace.com or Media Bistro, or also, and I really would recommend this, like if you love the books that they represent, just email them and let them know that you're interested, and maybe the timing will be good. Like the timing's not good for me right now, but maybe I'll have your name on file and we can figure something like that out. So hopefully that's a way to help you out there. As an agent, do you see a lot of books with similar themes or themes that are overused? Do you provide that feedback to the person, or is it just too much time to move on? Well, okay, so that's a great thing. Great question. First of all, different people respond to slush queries in different ways. Our agency has a policy that I actually do not like, but it still gets to me, it still is the way it is anyways, is basically in the slush pile, if you do not hear from us, then that's a pass after 6 weeks. I mean, you can check in, and I don't really like that. That said, when I am reading someone, and I have read it, I will respond directly, and I sometimes tell them, but I usually don't do a full analytic breakdown unless I'm really, really into the book. Basically, things are just really busy, so unfortunately, I pass and try and let them know some of the gist. But similar themes, I wouldn't normally be like, well, I've seen a lot of zombie stuff. I do see a lot of stuff with similar themes, but I think part of the problem is that everyone's seeing a lot of things. So even if you do find something, you have to be careful because other people might be submitting those things too. Again, zombies, vampires, hardcore space, whatever. It does change as it goes, and you find those themes. And once you're discovering these things coming out in the book form, you're a little too late because you get a query, you work on it, you sell it, it comes out. That's 2.5 years later. So you really have to be ahead of that game in order to make that work. What's the number one thing that gets you to read a manuscript? The number one thing that gets me to read a manuscript is that, well, okay, I'm just going to give you a few of them. One is that you come to me from a client that from a client that I respect. I respect my clients. I mean, that they're excited about the project as well. Another is that you have some strong bio stuff. You've been published in a major periodical, you've won awards. This happens a lot of times. People don't have stuff. Or you've been self-published to success as well. Those are the things that sort of get me to pay attention the most. Clarion West also does it because I really love Clarion West. MFA programs do not. I will pay attention, but I don't know if it makes me put you on the top of the pile. How involved are you with manuscript development after you take on an author? Great question, Sam. I'm very, very involved. Different agents act different ways. I think some people say, oh, editors don't edit. I think that what's probably more accurate is that there's a lot of people that have to buy a book in the buying process, not just one editor. And you basically need it to be in a strong enough shape where people can really see it and trust it and move forward. Now, I do wish sometimes an editor will pass on something where I'm like, well, you could have just edited that. I find that to be a little frustrating for sure. But what they're probably saying is that someone else said no, or that they didn't really like it as much as you want, and they're just being nice. If you love something and you think you can edit it, then you'll take it on. So for me, I like to be a real strong part of the process. I think there's no way, like imagine it like this. I take on a book. I love it. I think it needs editorial work, but instead of putting that work into it with the author, I send it on to the editor. That's crazy. Like the point is that you get it as strong as possible. So I work on it until it's done. In fact, sometimes I have to not continue on with books that are even of my clients that I love. I'll have to be like, this is just not the right idea. And it happened recently with a client. I won't say the name, but that client went back and did a totally. We finally put this book in a drawer after 5 or 6 edits, and the client came back with a draft of something else, and it's so good and so exciting, and that was really the right move, is to put that thing in the drawer. So I'm happy we did that. And one of the reasons why we do that is because this is my book too, and my life too, and my reputation too, and I'm a human. Like, I think that's something that's really important, is that we're not just like this is all about money and we're parasites. It's not like that. Like, this is us too. So we want the book to be as strong as possible. We want to believe in it as much as possible. And the better the book is, the more excited we're going to be, the more excited everyone else will be, the better we'll sell it. And the more you get to write. Quit your job if you want to do that. Is there any specific inside knowledge that you think writers should know about being an agent, but generally don't? Gosh, that's a great question. It's almost an abstract question, but there's so many things. I think a lot of people don't know a lot of things, and that's one of the things that you really got to get your mind wrapped around. Like, for instance, if you get a book deal, say for $100,000, mind you, that's a nice amount of money. You don't get all that money straight up. You get it in 4 payments. That means that you get paid over a period of time, maybe in $25,000 chunks that then get cut out of taxes and your agent fee. You're still going to have to work at your job. Like, that's like one of the surprising things. I think sometimes the money is a little bit different than you think. That's such a good question, but that's one that on the fly I might have to come back to. So maybe I'll highlight it in a different color and come back to it. Okay, let's see here. Would you consider an ongoing series that was originally self-published but wanted to transition to a more traditional publishing? That's a great question. The answer is yes, but with real hesitations. If it's an ongoing series, you are probably going to need to sell the rights to that book to that traditional publisher. In some ways, the first books, I mean, like, you can't just start in book 5. You'll probably have to sell all the rights, and in order to do that, it'll probably have to be a pretty successful book, series or book. And what is successful? That's a little tricky. There's a lot of different ways to measure success, but basically moving the needle in terms of sales in a pretty serious way. And we've been able to do some interesting things. Let's see here. We got Annie Bellett. This is the book 1 of the volume 1, rather, of called Level Grind of the 20-sided Sorcerer series. She is publishing these as pretty short books that are doing very, very well, and we only sold the print rights to Saga. And so there's going to be coming out in 2 volumes, really great. And this is one way to do that, because there's already a market level of success in the fan base, and hopefully it'll expand that and let people do that. But you can still buy the books online. And we're willing to do that. Of course, mainly for those they're bigger projects. Bigger books, because otherwise it's hard. Now, one thing that's really important, though, is if you've self-published, that's not like something negative against you, even if you haven't sold many copies. Maybe I won't sell that book, but what I will do is, look at whatever book you give me and see if it's good and just take it on as is. If that book had sold well, then that helps. If it doesn't, it's not necessarily a big negative SWOT against you. Do I feel a responsibility about the moral a book that you represent supports? Yes, I do. Now, it's interesting. So some people have brought up the fact that, since this election, that publishing might have, some attacks on it, free speech-wise or whatnot. And I really don't think that's the case, because, everyone in this industry from all levels and all sides of it really believe in the written word. But there are people who, every book that's out there on whatever side saying whatever they do has someone representing it. And sometimes they just smile and make a lot of money off those people. And other times they really believe them. For me, it's not necessarily about a responsibility of the moral of the book. I mean, it certainly is. But, that stems right into me loving what I represent and, being a part of the process. And I don't know how you can do that if you don't love it, how you can have a moral separation. Okay, Alice, question from Alice. In query letter reading, do you prefer conventional letters or the ones that try to stand out? Um, Again, here's a repeat for people. Check out Worldbuilders YouTube page with my name on it, and you'll find a 1 hour long how to write a query letter thing, which I'll go through all that. But the quick of it is that when I was younger and applying to colleges, some people would say things like, "Oh, this one person said and wrote like in lieu of application, here's like my screenplay," and then got into Harvard or something. First of all, that's crazy. And if that does happen, that's crazy. That stuff doesn't happen. Don't be flashy. Don't be weird. Feel free to have light humor in there, but you don't need to do that. What you're really trying to do is get me to know why you're writing, get me to know who you are, why you're writing me, who you are, and then get me to the book and let the book stand out on its own. A great query letter, it's going to get me excited, but it's not going to get me to take you on. So, what's important to know is also like we'll give you a fair shake. It's the writing. It's the writing that matters. We'll give you a fair shake. Make sure that you submit the book to the right people, though. If you submit to me a memoir, then that might not be the right thing because I have only taken on 2 in my life, and I don't know why. I read them, I care about them, but I just don't represent memoir very much. And if you send it to me, that's probably the wrong thing to be doing. But if you don't send me something, well, no, I'm not going to say that because maybe that'll be good. Yeah, so you should do your research and know who you're sending to. The easiest way to do that, by the way, is to find the people you like or books that are similar to yours in style and tone and look in the acknowledgments and query that person. Again, back into that YouTube thing I told you about. Okay, what is a typical first book advance for a sci-fi fantasy novel? Does it range wildly or is there a typical range? Does it range depending on the publisher? Yeah, so typical numbers is a little tricky, right? I will never tell you what a book is going to get because there's a false sense of expectations. But different publishers do different things. I will say there's a bit of an interesting shakeup going on right now in that you have the traditional publishers, and there's not many of them, and there's different ones that we go to in different times, like But let's talk about like Del Rey and Ace and Tor and John Joseph Adams books and Saga and Orbit and Harper Voyager. Those are sort of the main first rounders. And what's going on right now is that there are a lot of other publishers that are, some of them from the same companies, that are occasionally joining the fray, and they will spend potentially a lot more money, and they're causing everyone to sort of hike up advances a little bit more. So, for instance, Crown, which published Ready Player One and The Martian, is a bigger name jumping in there. Echo will do some more. Knopf published with me. They're publishing Daryl Gregory's Spoonbenders, and they published Brian Catling's The Vor, The Water Knife. Some of these other publishers that are not necessarily initially thought of in that vein are jumping in there, and they have deeper pockets or they have different theories. If I'm honest, the sci-fi world tends to be much more frugal, probably smartly, but I also wish people spent more money. In terms of advance, in the sci-fi, and just a regular, if you're only sending it to the sci-fi people, then the advances tend to be in the lower five figures, and I routinely get more than that, sometimes in a very big way. But part of that is setting things up in a specific way, and what you really need to do is know what kind of book you have and have a set of expectations. So sorry for not being more specific, but it's hard to figure those things out. Also, I'll say that foreign rights can net you some real money too. So sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, depending on you get a deal, but you get a deal in Germany for 25,000 euros, you can be happy. You get $10,000 audio deal, you can be happy. I mean, there's a lot of ways to take a property and expand on that, and you need to find an agent who can do that for you. How should one go about beginning to look for an agent? You should watch the YouTube thing that I mentioned on Worldbuilders, Seth Fishman. You'll find it. How likely am I to take on a new author? What is my personal criteria on taking something on? Well, I'll take on a new. I do have a pretty full list now, but I can't say no to something I love. So if there's something that is great, then I will take it on. But I will usually see how they are doing with my editorial notes, see where I am, and see what I'm looking for at that moment. It, Smaller books, as in books that are going to be harder sales, are a little bit harder to take on nowadays. And it's not that I'm looking for a big book. What I'm looking for is to devote my time to an author, and that that takes a lot of work. So I want to be able to make sure that I have the space both for you, but also for my clients that I have. Everyone that I take on limits the amount that I can give to someone else. So it's important to weigh the whole thing. You're an agent and a published author. If you were to submit a manuscript to a publishing house, is it still considered unsolicited? That's a great question, because I have an agent, a guy named Kirby Kim at Janklow Nesbitt, who's really wonderful, and I rely on him a lot to create a buffer, because, and certainly sometimes I'm like, I know what I'm doing here. Like, I could do this. But I think it's still really important to separate yourself. And so if I, as an agent, have a manuscript, I'm sorry, an agent, then I think that you should have an agent too. And what's funny is that there are things that are like don't do's, that I'll tell people, and then I go do them myself. Like, I understand it's like really hard when your agent becomes your friend. I'm very good friends with my agent, and then once I texted him a question that was work related, and then I immediately was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I won't text again." Because I don't want to receive a text from you about work unless it's really, really important. And obviously you can do that, but like, in other words, we have separate channels in life, and so I cross those don't lines sometimes myself. I think that when you're an author, sometimes you just get neurotic, because you know why? Because you spent a long time working on something that you really care about it by yourself in a room, and then you basically give it over to someone. And so you need to find someone that you trust to be your advocate for you on that fullest level, and that's what you're looking for in an agent. What is on your manuscript wish list? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm looking for anything, and that's obvious. So let me try and be a little more specific. I would love a Western, either literary. Well, no, I would love a Western in a number of different ways, but it has to be something that gets me. I'm from Texas, so I have certain visions in my head. I am looking for some more epic fantasy. Now, I get queries for epic fantasy, but they're hard to take on. But I'm looking for a good one. There are big reads. They're hard to read. A lot of them are good, but maybe not great. And I've always been wanting to expand that part of my list a little bit. And, same in the YA space. I'm really diving into the picture book space as a picture book writer, and I represented some wonderful Pixar animators, and Kate Beaton is doing one, and Ryan North is doing one for me. So I'm really trying to do more picture books. But in general, you just want to do, you just want ideas that are new and different and interesting. So I'm willing to get there. I like deep space too. I'm not always sure that that's what a publisher wants, but I like deep space. How does the industry change when dealing with graphic novels or comics? Are my routes for an agent different if I want to debut a graphic novel? Absolutely, absolutely. So, graphic novels, first of all, is it a literary graphic novel? If it's a literary graphic novel, then you can send it to more traditional publishers. Norton will publish them, Pantheon, First Second, Toronto Quarterly, Top Shelf, those. And I do one of those a year. In fact, today, Isabel Greenberg's best-selling author of Encyclopedia of Early Earth. Her next book, 100 Nights a Hero, came out, was named as NPR's one of the best books of the year. And that's a literary book. That's the first time Little Brown, which is part of Hachette, has ever published a graphic novel into that space. So, I do care about that. And in order to do that, if you're that's very complicated, but if you're the author illustrator, that's the easiest. And basically you need sample pages, a full script, and you need character sketches and ideally storyboards. I mean, the more the merrier. If you don't have an artist, I recommend getting an artist. Some people are fine just reading scripts, but I like going in with an artist. It's easier for me. It's easier to sell, I think. Yeah. For places like DC and Marvel, that's such an internal door. I don't do as much with them because they build so many things from the ground floor up. For webcomics, also a totally different thing. I love my webcomics. And they often, what we try and do is we try and get them to write something different that's similar. So, for XKCD, we had them take What If and turn that into a book that was really focused on a science audience in long form prose, which is different than just XKCD. Though we did a collection of Kate Beaton stuff, we also wanted to do other things, so we did the picture books and stuff like that. So that's a whole subset. Sorry, I'll stop right there. It's for everyone else. You mentioned small books are a hard sale right now. I've been trying to pitch a YA sci-fi book that is 56,000 words as the first book in a trilogy. So to clarify, when I said small book, I actually mean books that are, this is a nebulous thing, but when I read a book, I know, I can look at a book and say, hey, this is a, okay, let's talk about sci-fi for a minute, all right? There are the literary ones that can be successes in their own rights, like this is fantasy. The Vor, this has sold some 27,000 copies, a paperback original, great book, but that's a success. But 27,000 copies is not like 1 million copies. It's not it's not Pierce Brown. So you can read Red Rising and say that's a big book. That's a big commercial book. And this is a book that I read and I say, this is great. It has a lot of potential. We can keep this person, we can keep this person out there writing the books that they love, really challenging the world and maybe becoming a classic, maybe winning awards, growing in their size. But there's like different limits to those things. And so, it's important to come in with the real expectations of what can happen with your book. So that's what I'm talking about. In terms of short books, obviously there's you can't charge $15 for a 30,000 word book, but 56,000 in a YA is about right. I mean, that's fine. You can get up to 90 in a YA, but 56,000 is going to be okay. So I don't think you need to ditch it and make it 150,000 words. No. So let's say someone like Pat Rothfuss writes a bad book and asks you to be his agent. Would you accept him based on his previous work? Yeah. Okay, we're almost wrapping up. We got 4 minutes left, so let me just see some of these other ones here. I finished a domestic. Would you be willing to read an excerpt? Well, yes, of course. By the way, anyone who's looking at this, let's consider this for your query letter an open invitation. Now, obviously, I'm going to get a lot of queries based off of this, so be patient. But when you query, say in the first line, I saw your Facebook live stream, etc. And feel free to send me something. Is there a point when, having received a seemingly endless stream of thanks but no thanks rejections, the writer should decide to stop trying and to find an agent? Yes and no. I mean, so here's the deal. If you get a lot of rejections, we've all heard the J.K. Rowling stories, right? This all happens. If you get a lot of rejections, you trust your book and you keep trying, right? But you don't want a bad agent, okay? So only keep going to good agents. One. Two, if you get rejections that have editorial notes, then make those editorial notes if you agree with them or if there are some that are consistent. If they're all different, if one's like, I hate the first part, and the other one says, I love the first part, and that seems to be consistent, then you shouldn't do anything because, but at some point in time, yeah, you should stop. But you shouldn't stop finding an agent. You should just write and have another book. Everyone should have a book in a drawer. Very few people get out debut books that don't have books in drawers. So do consider it okay, and I would even consider it a rite of passage. I mean, I wish that we talk about November Writing Month. I think that there should be a communal, because the writing community is very communal and it's great. I think there should be a communal thing that you do when you put a book in a drawer that everyone gives you high fives. So it's your birthday on Facebook, everyone gives you nods and hurrah. I think that when you have a book that you're putting in a drawer, you take, well, no one prints out the full book now, but maybe a page from the book and light it on fire in front of everyone and then put that up on Twitter. And then everyone who sees that has to say something nice to that person or whatever, and congratulations, because it's like a real rite of passage to put something in a drawer, because that means that you're willing to take what you learned and move on to the next level. Because that's the thing, writing is hard. Writing is hard, and you have to practice, and you have to keep trying, and you have to get lucky, and it's like anything, work or sport or whatever, it's just something that you have to work on and continue going at. So I think that is the main. Let me just do one little look over to see if there's any follow-up questions I have, or any ones that came to me. Again, I can't read the Facebook ones, so I'm just looking that are sent over to me. Do I have different considerations in mind if the author was a standalone novel? If someone wants to send me a 5-book series, I might pause. I also don't. Here's something that you should do. I wouldn't say that I have 3 books done in a 3-book series, because I'm wondering what you've been doing with book 1 and 2 in that process. You can say it's a first book in a series. Just give me the first book and just focus on that. Let me see for the last things. I'm just scrolling through, seeing if I missed anyone. Best advice for writers. Best advice for writers. I mean, that thing of going to write is so heard. So let's move beyond that. I would say find a group of people that can read your manuscript, and that's not your parents, and just have people you can bounce off of, and also develop a thick skin, because this is the only industry where you get passes routinely, and you can have good passes. I think that's very interesting. You can be happy with a pass that has a personalized note. That's crazy. Okay, well, that looks like it's been an hour / I have finished the questions. Do I suggest an ebook publishing or paper publishing? Okay, well, that's a hard question to answer. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for being here and paying attention. We'll put this up on YouTube so that people can see it. And if you have any follow-ups, I don't know how to do that, but you can email me. And I look forward to seeing your stuff. And most of all, best of luck. I know it's hard, and I understand, but there are people who want to read your stuff and people who want to buy your stuff. You just have to do the hard work to get it there. So good luck with you there, and till next year. And donate, please. Go to Worldbuilders and donate. It's very, very important that you do. This is what this is all about. All right. Obviously, this is my first Facebook Live. I'm going to be a lot more interesting in 2 seconds. Let me just, let's see here.